The Echo in the Woods, A Voice from a Lost Tape. Chapter 1, The Vanishing at Whisperwind, Asheville, North Carolina, 2012. The Appalachian mountains around Asheville held a peculiar magic, a blend of ancient whispers and modern echoes. For me, Amelia Thorne, then a 24-year-old aspiring journalist, these mountains were home, a place of solace and adventure. But on one crisp autumn day, they became a place of profound, unbearable loss. My younger sister, Lily, was 15, a vibrant, fearless spirit with a passion for nature and a burgeoning talent for photography. She loved the remote trails of Pisgah National Forest, particularly the winding, often unmarked paths around a secluded area locals called Whisperwind Falls. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, where the wind through the pines sounded like hushed secrets. On October 27th, 2012, Lily packed her worn backpack, her trusty film camera, and a handful of her favorite audio cassettes, a quirky habit she'd picked up, preferring the warm crackle of tape to digital music. She was going on a solo hike to capture the peak autumn foliage at Whisperwind, a spot she'd scouted weeks before. "Be back by sunset, Leah," she'd shouted, her red hair glinting in the afternoon sun, her smile bright and unburdened. Sunset came and went. Our parents, usually laid back, grew increasingly anxious. We called her cell phone. No signal. We called friends. No one had seen her. The cold dread began to creep in, a serpent coiling in my gut. By midnight, the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department was involved. A full-scale search and rescue operation launched at dawn. Dozens of volunteers, park rangers, and search dogs scoured the dense forest around Whisperwind Falls. The news spread like wildfire through Asheville and beyond. Lily's face, bright and hopeful, plastered on missing posters, haunted every streetlight. Days turned into a week into a month. The autumn leaves, once vibrant, now fell, covering the forest floor like a shroud. The hope, once a fierce flame, flickered, then dwindled to a desperate ember. I joined every search party, my feet raw, my voice hoarse from calling her name. I knew Lily. She was resourceful, smart, but the forest was vast, unforgiving. Rumors circulated. A fall, a wild animal, perhaps even foul play. The authorities, with no clues, no trace, eventually scaled back the search. Our parents, once so full of laughter, became shadows of themselves. The silence in our home, once filled with Lily's music and laughter, became deafening. I felt a suffocating guilt. I was older. I should have protected her, insisted on going with her. Why hadn't I? My journalistic instincts, which usually sought answers, were paralyzed by grief and despair. Years passed. 10 years, then 12. Lily's disappearance became a cold case, a permanent ache in our family's heart. We held memorials, kept her room as a shrine, but the vibrant girl who vanished into the woods became a fading photograph, a silent memory. Our parents moved to Florida, unable to bear the constant reminder of the mountains that had swallowed their youngest daughter. I, too, left Asheville for a time, seeking solace in the anonymity of Atlanta, Georgia, throwing myself into my career as a true crime journalist, driven by a desperate, unspoken need to find answers, any answers in the stories of others. But the mountains always called me back. By 2023, I returned to Asheville, feeling an inexplicable pull. I bought a small cabin not far from Whisperwind, a silent vigil to a lost sister. I walk the trails, often alone, hoping for a sign, a whisper, anything. My life was defined by Lily's absence. I became obsessed with cold cases, with stories of the lost and found. My apartment was filled with files, research notes, and old crime reports. I meticulously organized everything, a desperate attempt to bring order to the chaos of my own unresolved grief. One rainy afternoon in October 2024, almost 12 years to the day Lily vanished, I was cleaning out the attic of our childhood home, a task I had put off for years since our parents left. It was full of dusty boxes, forgotten memories. I was looking for old photo albums to digitize for my mother. Tucked away in a corner, under a pile of old camping gear and forgotten board games, I found a small, nondescript cardboard box. It was marked. In Lily's neat handwriting, Whisperwind Project, do not open until after. After what? I had no idea. I had never seen this box before. My heart gave a sudden lurch. The dust motes danced in the lone ray of sunlight, filtering through the attic window, illuminating the forgotten box. Inside, nestled amongst some dried leaves and pine needles, was Lily's old, portable cassette player. And next to it, the small, worn audio cassette. It wasn't one of her music tapes. It was a blank recording cassette, one she used for field notes or voice memos. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The label, written in her familiar script, simply read, Whisperwind, October 27th. My breath hitched. October 27th, the day she vanished. A wave of nausea washed over me, mingling with a surge of desperate hope. Could it be? Could this old, forgotten tape hold a clue? A message? A final whisper from the past? The silence of 12 years was about to meet the raw, startling possibility of an echo. The vanishing at Whisperwind was about to reveal its first terrifying secret. Chapter 2, The Eerie Playback. Asheville, North Carolina, October 2024. The old cassette tape labeled Whisperwind, October 27th, felt like a relic from another lifetime. My hands trembled as I took it downstairs from the dusty attic, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 12 years of agonizing silence were about to be confronted by the eerie possibility of a voice from the past. I found a working boombox in my old bedroom, a relic from my own teenage years. It whirred to life, a comforting, familiar sound. I carefully inserted the cassette, my breath held tight in my chest. The plastic clicked into place. I pressed play. Static, a hiss, the familiar crackle of an old tape. My stomach churned. And then, faintly, a voice. It was Lily. Her voice. 15 years old, vibrant and clear, though a little breathless. Okay, so this is Lily Thorne, checking in from, let's see, Whisperwind Trail, just past the old mill ruins. It's October 27th, and the leaves are absolutely insane today. Wish you were here, Leah. Tears streamed down my face. Her voice, after 12 years, it was as if she were right there in the room, her infectious enthusiasm pouring out of the tiny speakers. I pressed pause, needing a moment to compose myself, to absorb the sheer miracle of hearing her voice again. My hands shook as I pressed play once more. The recording continued. Lily described the scenery, the vibrant colors of the autumn leaves, the sound of the wind. She narrated her hike, describing landmarks, making observations, her journalist-in-training spirit shining through. She sounded happy, carefree. The light is perfect here, she said, her voice closer to the microphone. I'm going off the main trail now, heading towards that hidden waterfall I found last time, the one with the strange carvings. Should be amazing shots. My blood ran cold. The hidden waterfall with strange carvings. I knew that place. It was incredibly remote, almost impossible to find without a guide. I had warned her about going off marked trails. A wave of suffocating dread washed over me. The tape continued, picking up ambient sounds, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, her own footsteps. Then, a sudden, sharp crackle, as if the microphone had been bumped. Her voice grew more hushed, a slight tremor in her tone. "Okay, so I found the waterfall," she whispered, her voice noticeably quieter, more serious. "And the carvings, they're not just carvings. They look like symbols, ancient. And there's something else here. A small shack? I've never seen it before. It's really old, almost hidden by the trees." A pause, then a gasp. A small, muffled sound, and then a frantic rustling, a desperate scuffle. The sound of her heavy camera bag hitting the ground. Her breathing, ragged and terrified. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice raw with fear. "Don't come closer. I've got my phone. I'll call someone." Then a low, guttural growl. Not an animal, something else, something deeper, more human. Lily screamed, a short, piercing, gut-wrenching scream, the kind that chills you to the bone. And then silence, the deafening, absolute silence, broken only by the hiss of the tape. I was frozen, my hands gripping the boombox, my body trembling uncontrollably. Her scream. It was so real, so vivid, as if it had happened just moments ago. It was the sound of pure terror. I rewound the tape, playing that final minute over and over. The low growl, the desperate scuffle, her scream, and then nothing. The tape continued to run, but there was only static, only the void. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Lily hadn't simply gotten lost. She hadn't fallen. She had encountered someone. Someone or something had taken her. The forest hadn't just swallowed her. It had delivered her into the hands of a predator. My grief, which had settled into a dull ache over the years, flared into a burning inferno of rage and agonizing certainty. Her voice, so full of life, so suddenly silenced. The last minutes of her life, recorded on this fragile cassette, now screamed a truth far more terrifying than any unsolved mystery. I called Detective Miller, the cold case detective who had reluctantly taken over Lily's file years ago. His initial enthusiasm long since dulled by lack of leads. "Detective," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "I found something. Lily's last recording, and it's not what we thought. She didn't just disappear, she was taken." The eerie playback had ripped open the old wound, but it had also provided the first tangible clue in 12 years. The whisper from the woods was no longer just the wind. It was Lily's terrified last moments, demanding that I finally, truly listen. The long, silent hunt for answers had just found its first chilling lead, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would follow it, no matter where it led. Chapter 3. The Search for the Shack, Asheville, North Carolina, October 2024. Lily's voice, raw with terror on that old audio cassette, replayed endlessly in my mind. Her last words, her scream, the guttural growl, they were a chilling soundtrack to my renewed mission. The cold case had shattered, revealing a far more sinister truth. My sister had been taken. I met Detective Miller at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department office in Asheville. He was a weary, stoic man, but his eyes widened with professional interest as I played the relevant portion of the tape. The static, the scuffle, Lily's scream. It was undeniable. The hidden waterfall with strange carvings and a shack, I repeated, my voice tight with urgency. She mentioned it. That's where she was. That's where we need to look. Miller nodded, his skepticism replaced by a grim determination. 12 years is a long time, Miss Thorne. The forest changes. Structures degrade. But this is the first real lead we've had. We'll mobilize a team. The next morning, armed with the cassette as our compass, a specialized search team, including canine units trained for human remains detection, joined me in Pisgah National Forest. The air was crisp, the leaves still vibrant, a cruel mockery of the day Lily vanished. I led them to the general area where I knew the hidden waterfall was. Lily's narration was our guide. Okay, I'm cutting off the main trail now, heading towards that hidden waterfall. I replayed her words, following the path she described, the subtle changes in the ambient sounds on the tape helping to pinpoint her exact movements. The rustle of dry leaves, the snapping of a twig, the distant sound of a specific bird call. I listened intently, as if Lily herself were whispering directions from beyond the grave. The hidden waterfall with strange carvings was indeed remote, tucked away in a deep ravine, almost swallowed by dense rhododendron thickets. The carvings, crude, ancient-looking symbols, were etched into the rock face behind the cascade, hinting at a forgotten history. And then, just as Lily had described, almost completely hidden by overgrown vines and fallen trees, we found it. A small, dilapidated shack. It was barely more than a lean-to, constructed from rough-hewn timber, its roof partially caved in. It looked abandoned for decades, blending almost seamlessly into the forest floor. My heart pounded. This was it, the place. The canine units went to work, their trained noses diligently sniffing the decaying wood, the damp earth around the shack. Within minutes, one of the dogs, a German shepherd named Sarge, began to bark frantically, digging at a particular spot near the shack's collapsed wall. Detective Miller ordered the team to excavate the area. The ground was soft, covered by years of leaf litter, and there, buried just beneath the surface, they found it. Not Lily, but her film camera and her backpack, both heavily damaged, weathered by years of exposure, but unmistakably hers. The camera's casing was cracked, the lens shattered, the backpack was ripped, the fabric rotted in places. A new wave of despair washed over me. No body, no closure, but the presence of her belongings, buried here, in this remote, chilling spot, confirmed the tape's grim narrative. This was where she was taken. The team continued to search the area around the shack, meticulously sifting through the earth. Inside the shack, amidst the decay, they found crude, rusted tools, a shovel, an old pickaxe, but no personal effects, no signs of long-term habitation. The place seemed to have been used as a temporary hideout, or perhaps a place for someone to bring their victims. The investigation shifted. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was a potential abduction, a possible murder. The cold case was now blazing hot. My journalistic instincts, sharpened by years of researching true crime, kicked in. I started investigating the history of the Whisperwind area, delving into local lore, unsolved disappearances, and any reports of strange individuals living off the grid. I spent hours at the Asheville Public Library, poring over old newspapers, obscure local history books, even dusty county records. I interviewed longtime residents, old park rangers, anyone who might have knowledge of the area's darker secrets. I remembered a local legend Lily had once told me, a whispered tale about a hermit of the Whisperwind, a reclusive, unhinged man who had allegedly lived in the deepest parts of the forest decades ago, a figure of local urban legend. I dismissed it as folklore at the time. Now, it felt chillingly real. The search for the shack had not yielded Lily, but it had yielded undeniable proof of what happened to her. The voice on the tape had led me to the precise location of her last moments, confirming the horrifying truth of her abduction. My grief now had a tangible target, a direction. The hunt for her captor, the low, guttural growl, had officially begun, pulling me deeper into the dark heart of the mountains that held my sister's final secret. Chapter 4: The Hunter and the Haunt, Asheville, North Carolina. December 2024. The discovery of Lily's camera and backpack near the dilapidated shack in Pisgah National Forest transformed her cold case into a chilling, active investigation. The Buncombe County Sheriff's Department, led by Detective Miller, poured resources into the area, setting up forensics teams and expanding the search perimeter. But the forest, vast and unforgiving, yielded no more immediate clues about her captor. My journalistic instincts, now fiercely honed, drove me beyond the official investigation. I became a relentless hunter of answers, consumed by the need to identify the low, guttural growl that had silenced my sister. The voice on the tape haunted my waking hours, her scream echoing in the quiet moments. I focused my research on local legends and historical disappearances in the Whisperwind area. My initial dismissive attitude towards the hermit of the Whisperwind changed. I interviewed retired park rangers, older residents, anyone who remembered the tales. I learned that the legend stemmed from a real man named Silas Croft, a reclusive trapper who lived off the grid in the 1960s and 70s. He was known for his violent temper, his deep distrust of outsiders, and his uncanny ability to disappear into the wilderness. He had vanished himself in the early 1980s, presumed dead, his cabin long since reclaimed by the forest. This was too far back, I thought. Lily disappeared in 2012. Silas Croft would have been in his 80s, possibly dead. But the idea of a reclusive, dangerous presence in the woods, even a generational one, lingered. I delved into police archives, cold case files from neighboring counties. I cross-referenced missing person reports from the region, looking for patterns, for other disappearances near secluded areas. My apartment in Asheville became a war room, covered in maps, timelines, and suspect profiles. The authorities, meanwhile, focused on the few forensic clues from the shack. There were no fingerprints. The ground was too soft for clear footprints. But they did find traces of an unusual type of rope and some specific, rare botanical elements around the shack that were not indigenous to that immediate area. These hinted at a suspect who either traveled widely or had specific access to unique materials. My research led me to a series of unsolved disappearances of young hikers in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, roughly 2 hours west of Asheville, between 2005 and 2015. All were women, all were experienced hikers, and all had vanished without a trace from remote, off-trail locations. The similarities were chilling. Could this be a serial predator operating across the region? I presented my findings to Detective Miller. He was intrigued but cautious. "It's a long shot, Miss Thorne, but the pattern is certainly disturbing." While official channels moved slowly, I became more aggressive. I wrote an article for a prominent true crime online journal, outlining the renewed investigation into Lily's case, hinting at a potential serial predator in the Appalachians. The article garnered national attention, drawing in tips from amateur sleuths and concerned citizens. One tip stood out: an email from a woman in Knoxville, Tennessee. She described her brother, Caleb Croft, a survivalist and reclusive individual who bore a striking resemblance to an old photograph of Silas Croft she'd stumbled upon in a family album. He spent extended periods living off the grid in various remote parts of the Appalachian Range, including areas in North Carolina and Tennessee. He had a history of violent outbursts, a profound distrust of women, and an unusual collection of exotic plants and ropes from his travels. He had inherited a small, remote cabin deep in the mountains from his grandfather, Silas Croft, who, contrary to popular belief, had not died, but had gone off the grid to live out his final years in total seclusion. This meant Silas could have lived much longer, perhaps even into Lily's disappearance. My blood ran cold. Caleb Croft, a connection to the original hermit, a pattern of reclusive behavior, a history of violence, an interest in specific plants and ropes. This was it. I immediately shared the tip with Detective Miller. He initiated a surveillance operation on Caleb Croft's remote cabin, a dilapidated structure in the deepest, most inaccessible part of Cherokee National Forest, just over the state line in Tennessee. It was far from the Whisperwind area, but accessible by a network of old logging roads. The surveillance revealed Caleb Croft to be indeed reclusive and wary. He rarely left the cabin, but when he did, he moved with an unnerving stealth through the dense forest. The crucial break came when police obtained a warrant to search Caleb Croft's cabin. Inside, amidst the squalor, they found chilling evidence. Old photographs of young women, carefully hidden, maps of remote hiking trails marked with X's, and most chillingly, a small collection of personal effects: a delicate silver locket, a hand-stitched leather bracelet, a well-worn compass, items belonging to the other missing hikers dating back years, and then a small faded red ribbon. It was identical to one Lily always wore in her hair. My heart seized. It was hers. The search for the shack had led to the hunter. The low guttural growl now had a name: Caleb Croft. The silent hunt for answers, driven by a voice on an old tape, had finally found its terrifying conclusion, pulling me into the darkest heart of my sister's vanished life. Lily's echo had not only led me to the location of her abduction, but to the monster who had taken her. Justice, after 12 years, felt terrifyingly close. Chapter 5: Echoes and Reckoning. Asheville, North Carolina, early 2025. The evidence found in Caleb Croft's remote cabin in Cherokee National Forest was overwhelming. The personal effects of multiple missing hikers, including Lily's ribbon, the maps, the patterns of behavior. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Caleb Croft, the modern hermit of the Whisperwind, was a serial abductor and murderer. He was apprehended by law enforcement in a swift, quiet operation. The interrogation was long and difficult. Caleb Croft, a man haunted by his grandfather Silas Croft's dark legacy and his own twisted pathologies, confessed to Lily's abduction and to the disappearances of the other hikers. He revealed his method: luring young women off remote trails, taking them to hidden, isolated locations, sometimes the Whisperwind shack, sometimes his own cabin, and then silencing them. He buried his victims deep in the vast, unforgiving wilderness, scattering their remains to prevent discovery. Lily, he claimed, had fought back, screaming, and he had silenced her quickly, burying her in a particularly secluded spot near a small, unnamed stream not far from his cabin, on the Tennessee side of the National Forest boundary. The confession, though agonizing to hear, provided the first true glimmer of closure in 12 years. The authorities mounted a painstaking search based on Caleb's directions. Weeks later, they found her, Lily's remains, near the stream, exactly where he said. After 12 long years, Lily was coming home. The news ripped through our family like a fresh wound, but also a profound, bittersweet relief. My parents flew back to Asheville from Florida, their faces etched with decades of grief, now mingled with a fragile peace. Lily's funeral, a proper burial this time, was held in Magnolia Cemetery, next to our Charleston relatives. It was a day of shared tears, but also a celebration of her vibrant life, no longer shrouded in mystery. Caleb Croft was tried in federal court as his crimes spanned multiple states and national parks. The audio cassette, Lily's final recording, was a pivotal piece of evidence, her terrified voice bringing the brutality of his actions to chilling life for the jury. His confession, combined with the forensic evidence from his cabin and the discovery of Lily's remains, led to a swift conviction. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a monstrous chapter finally closed. For me, Amelia Thorne, the journey from grieving sister to relentless truth seeker had been transformative. The experience had irrevocably changed me. My journalistic career shifted from general true crime to specializing in cold cases, particularly those involving missing persons in the wilderness. I became an advocate for victims' families, working with law enforcement, leveraging my research skills and public platform to bring attention to forgotten cases. I established the Lily Thorne Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding specialized canine search and rescue teams, and providing resources for families of missing persons in remote areas. The old audio cassette, Lily's last voice, became a sacred artifact, a testament to her courage and my unwavering promise. I kept it safe, listening to it occasionally, no longer with agonizing fear, but with a profound sense of purpose. It was a reminder of the darkness, but also of the light of truth that could pierce it. The pain of losing Lily would never truly disappear. It was a permanent part of my being, a scar on my soul. But the rage had softened into a quiet determination. The guilt I once carried was replaced by the knowledge that I had fought for her, found her, and brought her justice. The Appalachian Mountains, once a place of terrifying mystery, now held a different resonance. They were still vast, still wild, but they no longer felt solely like a place of loss. They were also a place where truth had been unearthed, where a sister's love had transcended time and silence. The echo in the woods, once Lily's terrified scream, was now the powerful reverberation of justice. The voice from a lost tape had not only broken a 12-year silence, but had reshaped my life's purpose, turning a personal tragedy into a beacon of hope for others. Lily was gone, but her echo and the memory of her vibrant spirit would continue to guide my quest for truth, ensuring that no other lost voice would remain unheard, no other story remain untold.